My name is Harriet Ferguson. I'm from the part of the Holy Family Parish in Belfast in Northern Ireland. I'm very privileged that in our parish we have 24-hour Eucharistic adoration, but that's only in the last 6 years. So to go back, I suppose, to my journey, as a child, I was brought up in a traditional Catholic family home. Indeed, I have a brother, a priest, and we always took part in the sacraments, in the missions. I remember even as a child at primary school, we used to do what we called October devotions and May devotions. So I would have been used to going to Mass sort of on a daily basis for certain parts of the year. And I carried that through my teenage years as well, because of the good example set by my parents, my mother in particular. I wouldn't have seen my father as such a holy man, but I remember being touched when my mother told me he was kneeling down at his bedside saying his prayers, and I walked into the room and came back out again. I was a bit surprised because I would have always thought that my mother was the holier of the two, and she said, "Oh, your dad, he prays for the conversion of Russia every day in life. He says a rosary." And I remember being struck by that and slightly surprised. I think I became keener, if you like, to do that wee bit more in terms of trying to make sure that it got to daily Mass. But there wasn't adoration in my parish at the time that I was in. And then a few years later, I remember I started going to the Divine Mercy Sundays, and I bumped into a work colleague, and she invited me to join her prayer group. And we all would have been people that would have gone to Mass more or less daily, would have said rosaries daily. So we thought, well, what more can we do in addition to that as part of this commitment to this prayer group? So we thought, well, we'll do an hour of Eucharistic adoration every week on top of our normal practices. And I thought to myself, where am I going to find an hour in the week? I have 4 young children at school. I work full time. I spent most of my time at home when I wasn't at work doing the normal chores. And I decided that I would do an hour on a Sunday evening. So I decided to do from 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock on a Sunday night after the busyness of the weekend was all over. And very quickly, I came to look on that as a sort of an hour of retreat from the world, an hour of peace, where I could just sit and say prayers, read the scripture, say a rosary, or just sit and do nothing. And I remember the words that Jesus said to Sister Breeze McKenna, that, "Don't you know you don't have to do or say anything? Just spend time with me. It's not what you do for me, it's what I want to do for you." Then after that, I would say that I became much more aware of the importance of the Eucharist. I gained a greater respect for the Eucharist, and I am beginning to understand that the Eucharist, the host, is a window. On this side is what I can see, and on the other side, it's heaven. And I think I've developed a much greater respect and understanding that Eucharistic adoration is like an extension of the Mass, which is such a great gift. And it's such a pity that so many people, even though they go to Mass, they're not actually engaged with what's going on. And maybe I was one of those people, and Eucharistic adoration has awakened me up to what is actually really going on, and that we're sitting in the presence of the same Jesus who walked the earth 2,000 years ago, and that he is God, but he is a human being, and that I can share my pains and my joys with him. And I remember when I was going through a very, very difficult time in my marriage 10 years ago, I would just go and sit and cry for a couple of hours in front of the Blessed Sacrament, not saying anything, not asking for solutions, just sitting and sharing my pain, if you like. And then 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer. And the day that I was told that I had cancer was the day that I would normally attend my Eucharistic adoration. and I was still in some pain from the biopsy that they'd had to perform to diagnose my cancer. But I went to my adoration that night anyway, even though I was in quite some pain and couldn't really say any prayers because I was in such pain, and probably an emotional pain as well. And I got, I think for the first time, I had a sense that Jesus was sharing my pain with me, and that I was sharing his pain with him, and there was a unity. I didn't ask for consolation. I didn't really feel that I had any consolation, but I felt that he was sharing my burden, and that to a much smaller extent that I was sharing in his burden. So I felt supported. And I thought back then to, you know, the image of when life is difficult, that's when he carries you. And very, very quickly, within a matter of days, I came to see my cancer as a blessing. I wasn't angry at God. I didn't say, why me? I started to see it as an opportunity to pray for others with cancer who perhaps were in a worse situation than I was in. I remember one day coming out of church after sitting praying for a while, and I met a colleague from work, and they said, there must be something in this because your face is just glowing. I didn't understand what he could see, but maybe he saw something. But more importantly, he said, maybe I should go back to Mass more often than I do. So I think it's very important that not only are we bringing blessings on ourselves by spending time sitting, sharing with Jesus, but that we're bringing those same blessings to others in our lives, to our children and grandchildren, and to our community, so that they get to experience the same joy and support and love. As Mother Teresa said, nowhere are you more loved and more understood than sitting in front of Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. And Pope Paul VI said that prayer is the cord that holds the web of life together. And that is the cord that is our relationship with Jesus. And it's a relationship of love. And that is what Eucharistic adoration means to me. It's a loving one-to-one relationship with Jesus. And I'm so grateful that he has given this gift to me.
The work of Shalom is an essential part and a powerful part of the work of evangelization, of promoting the objective of sharing the good news of the gospel, the joy of the good news of the gospel and its promise of salvation in this life and beyond death in the new life of the risen Lord. Its evangelization of culture and civilization is a most important objective for the people of God and the Church right around the world. In this 21st century, when the human family is battered by so many forces of change, of uncertainty, forces which seem to threaten and menace hope, the hope of the risen Christ and of the good news of the gospel is something which has to be shared not only between individuals, but with communities of peoples right around the nations of God's earth. May the Lord bestow his blessing on the work of Shalom, on all who are associated with it, and also indeed on all those who through their charity and kindness support its most important work.
Shalom World, God's own channel.